So my first question was, who is like King Solomon, and what was he about? Because I think there's a lot of information, or there's a lot of people that talk about King Solomon and some of the things he did, but they never really go into detail. So I wanted to know what Wu-Sabat teaches on King Solomon. And then, so I just got another question as well. And it kind of relates to kind of experiences that I've had.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see if you could point me in the right direction in terms of one of the scrolls. So I've always kind of had quite spiritual experience where I'm like aware.
Yeah.
But I'm aware, I'm conscious, but it's not physical. So I wanted to know what Wu-Sabat again teaches on stuff like that, and what scroll would be best for me to kind of learn some first principles and understand what's happening.
Okay. All right, cool. So the first question on King Solomon. See, a lot of these characters, even though we quote and talk about these characters that come by way of these religious books, and people ask us, that was a question. I didn't finish the Anunnaki question, which ties to this. When I was saying that it's like now, today, when we're trying to get away again from religion and teach the hereafter doctrine, which is what Partner Babyanun has really come to give us, which is Wu-Sabat covering Partaruk, actual facts and master secrets, we're getting drawn back into religion by way of the remix of the Abrahamic stories now, because people know now that Abraham was in contact with these Anunnaki. But the master teacher did say that we have to double back and pick up people that we lost along the way who are still caught up in religion. So we do still have to address them, but we don't want to get pulled back, because we're actually doing ourselves a disservice by not moving forward, so we can start to learn the hereafter doctrine, which is taking us to transforming us into those supreme beings, so we can learn all these things that people keep talking about, like astral projection and levitation and teleportation and all these things that we're able to do. But because remember, everything is vibrations and everything is energy. You have energy pulling you up and you have energies pulling you down, because they want to remain on that vibration to feed off of that energy. I'm just saying that to say that we do have to start to move away from these gospels, right? But in terms of, firstly, I wanted to say, in terms of your kind words, that we have the spirits are positive and negative, or agreeable and disagreeable. So people resonate. That resonation is like that vibration I'm talking about, because once you raise yourself to a certain vibration and you're connected or locked in, as you put it, with that vibration, is because you're also on that frequency, because the same resonance frequency will come together. All right, so that's that. Now, in terms of the question of books and what you can learn more about, because another thing, this is what I'm saying, that there are people out there that are talking about astral projection, and what people forget is that even though people can come out of their body and astral project, or what we call it an out of body experience, they are only still limited to certain realms. So the realm that they may see, or that they then come back and relay, is the one that they've been to, or the one that they're able to get to. That doesn't mean that there aren't other realms higher and above what they're able to see. So sometimes people will say things and give you images and show you what they experienced when they had an out of body experience. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's all that there is out there, because with us, as we teach by way of the master teachers, that there are 9 realms, and within that we're really using numbers that will give you the highest number being 9, but really we're saying there are 9 to the 9th power of 9. So only the beings who are able to reach the higher realms will be able to access those. So yeah, the books, we have so many books, and I would say start with reading books like the 30 Spirits, the ones that deal with, things like the 24 Elders. We have a whole list of books. And when I'm doing these lives, unfortunately, there are distractions because as I'm trying to answer a question or answer one on the chat, the phone's ringing and I don't really get to go into the details. So please join the Telegram group because we always post in books when people ask us, you know what I mean? But was there a second part to that question that I've forgotten? I can't remember. That's it, Solomon, that's it. Let me just answer the Solomon question before I take this next call. Yeah, so what I was saying is that a lot of the characters that you're given in the Bible, some of them are symbolic stories. Some of them are like allegorical. Some of them are actual incidents and things that took place. So most of those characters didn't exist. So when you're saying Solomon, you're saying Sol, which is a three-part word, right? On or Om and On. On deals with the sun, or what we're calling Heliopolis, which ties back into ancient Egypt, and that's dealing with Re. And so you don't really, it's like even any character you can think about, like in the Bible, a lot of, or Quran, a lot of that is symbolic stories about other people that have been combined and put into one. So even when you're saying Abraham, you're saying Ab, Ra, and Ham, which when you start to look into it, it's dealing with, it all ties back into ancient Egypt. That's what the basic point I'm saying. Solomon ties back to three triad beings from Egypt. Abraham ties into that. The Noah story comes from the Senefru story in Egypt. The Jesus story comes from the Haru story, which they call Horus. There isn't really any character in the Bible that is not a story or a concoction that has been drafted from ancient Egypt, because they all have to tie back into ancient Egypt. This is why even all the characters, like Jesus was sent to Egypt when he was a child, apparently he learned everything in Egypt, then he came back. Moses was found in Egypt, grew up in Egypt. Joseph and his family, they went to Egypt. Abraham went to Egypt. Everyone somehow has a tie to Egypt. And that should make you think, I'm talking about the significant characters, the main characters, why always a connection to Egypt? It's because the stories have been borrowed and copied from there. So we can go into much more detail about Solomon, because then it ends up with different denominations of religions, because obviously when you're looking at the Rastafarian religion, they tie back to Makeda, who we know again ties back to ancient Egypt as Ma'at Kareye, who they say is the Queen of Sheba, or in Islam she becomes Belkis, and that just shows you all of the Quran, everything in the Quran is already happened in the Old or the New Testament, and everything in the Old Testament is already happened in where they copied it from the Sumerian, and all the stuff that they're telling you about in the Sumerian ties back to Egypt. So when you're saying these Anunnaki, you're really tying back that to the Parnatharu, right, who were here first. So most of the stories are copies of copies. And so when we teach about them, we're teaching about them from the point of view that this is what the book says, and we're dealing with the incidents and relaying what the book's saying, and then we tell you, okay, cool. Now, let's say that person you're talking about didn't exist, but the person they've written about or copied the story from comes from ancient Egypt, and we can tie that back. And when we say ancient Egypt, people go back to the Egyptology, and that's another spell, because they just deal with the dynasties and they deal with the European version of what they're teaching you about Egypt. And we say, no, we're talking about going back pre-dynastic, going back to a time where we were, in what they're calling Egypt. So I hope that's kind of answered that question. If not, we can elaborate. Join the Telegram group.